Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Welcome to Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's second in a series of webinars on the Prescriptive Online Supply Chain Risk and Resiliency 90-Day Action Plan Assessment Tool. That's a mouthful. Thanks for coming today. Appreciate it. We look forward to a great day today with our webinar and gaining your feedback. We appreciate that you're taking the time to attend today's webinar on building a resilient enterprise using supply chain risk management, especially in light of the continued coronavirus pandemic. We hope that your family is healthy and safe. Today's webinar is the second webinar in the series of 6 webinars focused on the first assessment of 3. And this focuses on what we call the 21st century supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. We want this to be an interactive webinar consisting, we'll have some polling questions, and the chat window is open, and we have our team at Uphaven to help us garner the questions. So please make sure that you enter it in there. We'll be sure to get to you throughout. There's a pollev.com/Greg Schlegel 910 in the chat room. If you click on that link and open up another browser window, you can answer the polling questions as we go along. That makes it very interesting. So you have 2 ways: the polling and the chat or Q&A box. My name is Jim Vries, founder, president of Enhanced International Group. I will be the host of today's webinar. Again, from Uphaven, we have Jenny Fromm, Claire Fitcham, and Cindy Lou Voslo, who will be helping us facilitate today's webinar. So we have a big team with us to help you navigate. So please do ask questions throughout. Joining me, of course, is Greg Schlegel. He'll be sharing his vast expertise in supply chain risk management. Greg is one of the original founders of this supply chain risk and resiliency and former president of Apex ASCM. Greg founded the consortium in 2010. He's a celebrated speaker, esteemed author of the book Supply Chain Risk Management, an Emerging Discipline, published in 2015. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about our passion. You'll notice we get pretty passionate about the concept. I do teach supply chain risk management at Lehigh University here in the States in our MBA and executive education program. And I teach ERM, which we're not going to talk about today, enterprise risk management at Villanova University, again, here in the States. So great to be with you, and hope you find the discussion informative, Jim.
Great, thanks, Greg. With that, we'll just go ahead and get started. But we want to share with you the series. We're in the second webinar of the series on maturity model. The last one was last month on the overall program. And webinar 3 coming up in January is on risk appetite on January 20th. And then in February, we'll do operational propensity. And webinar 5 is about building that game plan. And then webinar 6 is making supply chain risk management a priority in your company, ending the webinar series in April. Greg?
Yep, you bet. We'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch of who the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium is. On the right, you can take a look at the logos. We have about 30, I think it's 30 companies worldwide, about 1,500 supply chain risk professionals, of which Jim is a long-standing member. These companies bring skills, tools, techniques, methodologies, and cloud-based solutions to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. On the left-hand side is essentially what we provide and what we've been providing since 2010. We have 2 online education courses. One is a basic course. One is now dedicated to public health care supply chain. They culminate with Lehigh certificates. We do virtual training like this. Boy, Jim and I probably have done 80 webinars since what, April of last year or more. We used to do classroom training, a little dig there. Before the pandemic, we used to do 25 classroom workshops a year. Hopefully that will begin to come back again in 2022. Again, we support certificates. We do assessments and mitigation for companies. We coach companies on this journey. Again, we bring solutions, some heavy lifting solutions. You can see some of the names. We bring best practices from our book, and we actually have started to work with folks to build supply chain risk war rooms. So that gives you a quick thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we provide. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. And just to give a brief overview of EIG, Enhanced International Group, it's an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation to provide self-generating and self-funding results. We have vetted over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers that are thought leaders to enable your enterprise. You can look at EIG as kind of like a Swiss Army knife, having the right tool at the right time with those partners' expertise. And the cool thing is the partners are dedicated in their particular area of expertise. We generate customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day self-funding programs. The bicycle slide that you see here is something we developed. Greg was certainly part of that. And it's a model of company's ecosystem with the two wheels, linking strategy on the right to execution on the left. The geared wheels are connected by a chain or strategy wheel being a little bit larger of the two, and they're of course linked by that chain, which you could say are your tactics. And so the two gears are inexplicably linked and in sync. Otherwise, you'll become derailed like your company. So developing an agile supply chain risk and resiliency mindset will ensure that we are successful in the journey. So in summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum for the company, its employees, customers, suppliers, and stockholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So let's get started with the webinar here and the agenda. And we'll start off the 6-part agenda with the compelling reasons to act with today's VUCA world and the W recovery and the impotence of the 90-day tool. And then we'll get into the maturity model, where are you? And then pretty much a deeper dive. We'll have a case studies in there, and then we'll review the prescriptive 90-day action plan, what to do now, and the give and the get. And of course, the big finale with the benefits of indoctrinating a supply chain risk and resiliency program to sell to your executives. All right, so let's get started. Greg?
Yep, we said we'll start with maybe a discussion on VUCA world and the Wlike recovery, and I believe what we'll do is start with a few definitions. So we just want to get you grounded. 2 definitions. What is an enterprise? What is enterprise resiliency? This comes from our book. Real quick, we like this one. What does a resilient enterprise look like? To us, a resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. We'll be honest with you, that's a pretty tall order. But this essentially to us is, why would you spend any time on supply chain risk and resiliency? This is why. The second definition is more or less the what and the how. It is what we call supply chain risk management. That definition looks like this. It's the implementation of strategies to manage everyday and exceptional risks along your entire supply chain through continuous risk assessment with the objective of what? Reducing business vulnerability and ensuring business continuity. So one way to think of SCRM, is to essentially think of it as the intersection of good supply chain management and excellent risk management. So we wanted to get you grounded on that. And I think we have another compelling reason to act. This is a study that was done back about five years ago, global study, trying to capture the magnitude of supply chain risk. And what they've came up with after going through, I think, a couple hundred companies, multiple sectors, across all industries, they came up with a number. On average, you and your organization are probably going to experience 11 risk events per 12 months in your supply chain. Then they went further. Then they attempted to append a dollar value for each one of those risk events, came up to about $350,000 US per event. So you can do the math, comes to close to $4 million on an annual basis that you will have to come up with out of your treasury to identify, assess, and probably attempt to mitigate those 11 risk disruptions. So we wanted to share that with you. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next slide.
So we'll look at it from an update from John Hopkins, a little bit brief update there. Of course, we're starting to see an upsurge in cases in the US and abroad, in India and Brazil are recovering from surges. Europe has lockdowns, such as Austria, Denmark, and the Netherlands recently having a partial lockdown. So with this Omicron virus strain, of course, South Africa is also feeling this. The top country death rates, unfortunately, are United States, Germany, UK, France, and Russia. For the US, we're entering into the sixth wave. You can see the waves, which reinforces our 2020 prediction of a W recovery, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. We're starting to counter the impact of the Bullwhip Effect, that it's on the front news of every network here in the US at least, and internationally. France 24 talks about it almost every day. And we're seeing overages. And the interesting thing is, you see a lot of shortages, but you see an unbalance because now we have overages in some areas like chlorine and now natural gas. And so it's on both ends. In the US, because of the increase in e-commerce, they can't build warehouses fast enough. And then the people to do that work, there are significant labor shortages in that area in logistics and transportation. And then as the holidays approach, we're seeing here shortages in beef and bacon, turkey, chicken, and things. Carbonated drinks is a thought, and the paper towels and toilet paper may come back. We're seeing a little bit of dip on the gasoline prices, hopefully soon, but we're still having the chip shortages, which is causing problems with cars and so forth. The 24/7 operations in the US has started to make somewhat of a dent in the backlogs in the ports. We're hoping that by early 2022, we'll get it under control a little bit better, barring future setbacks. Cyber attacks are alive and well, so to speak. They're coming across. So there's a lot going on out there, which leads us into the next slide for Greg.
Yeah, we thought we'd kind of get you grounded again with what we call the VUCA landscape. It's been out there for a while, but what does VUCA stand for? Well, VUCA, the V in VUCA stands for volatility. So what is that? Volatility, that describes something that is liable to vary or change, sometimes very quickly and often for the worse. So what can we align with volatility in our supply chain? As Jim mentioned, COVID-19, government lockdowns, government reopenings, and on and on and on. volatility in our global supply chains. U next stands for uncertainty. What is that? That's the state of not knowing or being able to rely on anything. What is that? That's our demand and supply shocks. For the first time in a long time, we are now witnessing both at the same time. Next, the C. C stands for complexity. This can be defined as something with many parts in an intricate arrangement. So what is that? That, my friends, is our global supply chain with all the nodes, facilities. It's very intricate and quite expansive. And finally, A stands for ambiguity. That is something is ambiguous if it's open to more than one interpretation. Jim talked about it in the last slide. That take all of the VUCA elements above and add it together, and we have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So we wanted to just get you grounded on the VUCA world. All right, next. These are digital investments in the VUCA world. This comes from McKinsey's latest Global Supply Chain Leaders report. It's a great report if you can get your hands on it. I think it came out in June of 2021. And essentially it's for us, for all of us, it's good news, bad news. The good news is companies' digital investment in visibility and planning is great. They've done a heck of a lot of investment, but according to McKinsey, have still neglected supply chain disruption monitoring. So we're getting better. And you can see the elements, the four basic, I think it's 4 or 5 basic elements. Supply chain visibility, number one, 77%. Very, very encouraging, because what you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. Specific planning tools, that's all good. All right, we encourage that. This one, the third one, end-to-end planning, that was very encouraging. We are big advocates of end-to-end visibility in your supply chain. This one came up as number 4, terrific for us, network modeling. We're big advocates of digital twins and digital modeling of your supply chain for risk. And then finally, the lowest of the 5 is supply chain disruption monitoring, which basically says we all still have a lot of work to do to get more companies engaged in constant monitoring around the globe of risk alerts. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great, Greg, thank you. So we have our first polling question here that we asked you to participate in. And what are the risk events that you've experienced in COVID-19 over the last 18 months or so? I'll turn on the responses to see. I think I'll turn on the responses to see what you guys are thinking out there. I guess you're still typing in, that's fine.
Yep, that's good.
The instructions again are canceled events.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I just canceled event for tomorrow. Absolutely. Delays.
Yep.
I think Greg, you had some events that you were supposed to go physically and now they're virtual.
Yeah, they're all virtual. Yep.
Yeah, every time. Most of the time when folks create a event, very often it ends up going virtual before you know it. But there have been some events this year. People have gone plugged ahead.
Yep.
Prices. I'm guessing that's increased prices. Yeah. We have inflation. This pandemic definitely is causing inflation out there.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a question of, will it deflate when it evens out, or will it stay at its higher level? That's the, I guess you can't say $1 million question now. You have to say $1 billion question.
Yep. Yeah, good. A lot of threads here. All good. And remember, this tool, the more frequent the thread, the bigger the font. So that's the that's the very intriguing part of this mechanism in Poll Everywhere. So, yep, we've seen it all. It's great. I wish we had less, from a supply chain professional point of view, but boy, end to end, there are just so many, I'll say, choke points and points of failure at the moment because of all the bullwhip effect that we feel your pain every day.
Absolutely. Well, thanks
Appreciate.
everyone for participating.
Yeah, good.
Good,
Thanks.
response there. I think we'll move on and introduce the bullwhip effect again. We like this definition here. The bullwhip effect is the uncertainty caused from distorted information flowing up and down the supply chain. On the left here, we have its effect on the demand side. The left side is that wavy line is the customer there, customer demand. A small change in that amplitude of demand can manifest itself into quite a large disruption back through the supply chain, the supply side of the chain. On the right side here, well, let's look at the supply side now. The left side of the graph, the factory can experience a risk event, which disrupts the flow of goods downstream to the ultimate manufacturer and its customers. Thus, when you put them together, what do you get? You get you get the supply and demand disruptions onto a graph, and that's exactly when all the industry sectors have wrestled with and have been wrestling with over the coming months, and will continue to. The question is, are we at that supply demand imbalance? Are we at the peak of that? And are we recovering from that, from a supply demand supply chain balance? Of course, these intermittent COVID surges around the world is going to exacerbate these perturbations and will continue well into next year. And since we are a global supply chain, a lockdown in one country is going to have an effect on another country, even if they're not locked down. So what you see, what you'll see in the next few slides is the results of that and what we're seeing. Greg will now share the impacts of the 3 R's. Greg?
You bet, Jim. This is our W recovery slide. We think this is kind of a continuum left to right. I'll be brief and we'll go through real quick, give you a thumbnail sketch, but we, the consortium, put this out to our client base and to attendees in workshops, classrooms, and so forth back in May of 2020. All right, that's when we made the call and called it a Wlike recovery going forward. So what's the graph say? On the top of the slide, from left to right, are the government mandates: lockdown, reopen, first normal, second, third, nth, on and on, left to right in a continuum. On the y-axis, on the left, is our segmentation of the global supply and demand arena. So on the top left, we have an over demand and an undersupply dilemma for product during the W recovery. The green in the middle is supply and demand in relative balance that we are used to in the past. And then on the bottom left is an under demand and oversupply dilemma for product. And then on the x-axis on the bottom, what we did is we superimposed our business response in each one of these 3 phases, and we essentially called first phase respond, second phase recover, and then third phase renew. So as you can see on the bottom, we recognize the bullwhip effect would be prevalent for some time into the future as of May 2020. We just didn't know how long. So in the respond phase, companies were reducing their product portfolios. They're attempting to keep up the volume to support their existing customers, and they're trying to rescale their supply chains. In the middle, in recover, companies continue to reduce their portfolios. They attempt to reinvent their product lines, and they're attempting to go after potentially new customers. because it's brand new with a reopening. And then finally in the renew, where we've actually seen a lot of companies are residing now based on our sentiment analysis and our webinars, the bullwhip effect has diminished to a certain degree. And companies are now attempting to ramp up to satisfy the new demand. So that's a brief little profile of what we call the Wlike recovery and the 3 R's. Okay, next.
So we wanted to find out, get some data here, and this comes from our friends at McKinsey again, published in November, but the survey ended up in June of 2021, mid-June, first half. And what they did is they asked the question, what did you plan to do versus what did you do in reaction to COVID? And you can see from the top, the first thing that folks identified was increasing inventory of critical products. About half of the folks of the 70 or so respondents said they planned to do that in May of 2020. And then what did they implement over the next 21 months? Actually, a little bit higher, 61%. So it went essentially from 50 to 60% of the people increasing inventory of the critical products. The next one is dual sourcing of raw materials. About half the respondents said they plan to do it, and just a little bit more than half then actually did it. When you look at inventory along the supply chain, now you start to see it starting to bulge, which I think might have to do with shortage of warehouses. Everything's backed up. And so you're seeing an increased inventory along the supply chain. So everybody thought maybe 30% of the folks thought it, and 42% said that they are implemented changes to support this. And then regionalizing supply chain, that's a little bit harder to do. I think people, at least 40% thought that they would do it, 38%, whereas only 25% were able to do it. Again, this is not enough space out there to be able to start doing that. Expanding backup production sites, that's another thing that takes quite a bit of work. About 25% wanted to do it and did it. This is the nearshoring and increasing supplier base. I think there's a lot of pressure to try to do that. At least 40% wanted to do it, and only 15% were able to do that. So that'll be very interesting to watch over the next year to see if that one increases. So the other two, reducing SKUs, a lot of good plans, but not about half the people were able to do it. And nearshoring, very little tried to do nearshoring production. So I think that was kind of interesting as it aligns to the WR and the 3 R's recovery. So with that, Greg, you want to take this survey on?
Yeah, sure. Well, now that we've given you kind of a thumbnail sketch of the 3 R's, respond, recover, renew, we thought we'd ask another question about where do you feel your organization resides at the moment within these 3 phases. And we put in another element at the bottom, combination, could be. But we just thought we'd ask to, it's not scientific, but basically it's a sentiment analysis kind of question. Where do you feel your organization or supply chain is today? We just thought we'd ask.
I think the last time we did it, they were a lot of response. They were in recover.
Yeah, and we just did one just for the folks on the call. We just did a webinar with Asia Pacific folks. And boy, that was very interesting. We asked the same question, and a lot of those folks, almost 80% of the respondents folks they said they were in the renew phase. That was very intriguing, very intriguing. First time I saw that in a while. So I just wanted to give you a couple of additional data points.
Great. So,
Yeah, again, folks, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, again, it's a sentiment analysis type question about how you feel and what you're experiencing relative to our 3 R's. So there is no right or wrong answer. And we appreciate your engagement here in the polling question. So thanks a lot.
okay.
Terrific.
All right, I think we'll move on. If you have
Mhm.
questions, we encourage you to ask questions in the chat. Please do that. We always love to get your questions of what's resonating for you. With that, I think we'll move on to the second section, which was, what is the impotence for developing the prescriptive 90-day assessment and action plan tool? And we'll get on to that right now. So the impotence is, of course, the pandemic, which we've discussed quite a bit about, further inspired by the November report by McKinsey, where they wrote in there why investing in supply chain resiliency pays off, which has further been reinforced by the focus by governments to industry leaders to the news networks. It's obviously a household name now. The third item is the inability to sit with companies to be able to lead, guide, direct, and coach within a company hallways. Our online tool does not just tell you where you are, it tells you how to get where you want to go in the most expeditious way. The action plan provides you insights to your company's operating environment and supports you in building capabilities to ensure you can not only survive, but thrive. And finally, there has been a continued staggering and uneven negative impact of the pandemic on manufacturers due to the artificial demand and supply shocks. There's no end in sight. We do not recommend waiting it out. Act now or be acted upon. So with that, I'll just briefly go over the 90-day action plan tool. It consists of 90 questions, generating a 90-day action plan. It should not take you more than 30 minutes to complete the tool. We have the total time investment of taking the survey, understanding what's in the survey, understanding our action plan, going through our consultation and coaching sessions is 7 hours. We also provide additional consulting on top of that as part of this package. But what do you get? You get where are you, which is the maturity model, which we'll cover today. Who are you? Your risk appetite in your organization. Again, there's no right or wrong here. You also get how do you operate? That's your operational propensity. Some people call it culture. And then of course you get the 90-day action plan, which is 5 to 8 actions that you take. So what we ask of you is have a designated lead, have an onboarding call with the team, the executive team. Then we would have your 5 to 8 stakeholders in your business of choice in your organization, where you want to focus your business unit and include folks from supply chain, finance, marketing, sales, logistics, operations, and procurement. So you get a cross-functional view of your organization. Then we'll give you the action plan report for you to review and your team to internally look at it. And then we'll have a check-in call on that particular 90-day action plan with a virtual meeting. And then every 30 days, we'll have another call. First call after is, of course, is it working with your cross-functional team, pulse checks, and then the final call. And throughout this, of course, we'll be providing coaching throughout. So with that, we move to the next section. Greg?
Yeah, we're going to do a little deeper dive for you now, focus on the maturity model as it relates to the 90-day action plan and report. So we'll get you grounded on the next slide in terms of the maturity model. This model is the basis for our book, for all our classroom workshops, and all our products and services. So I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch. On the left, on the y-axis, you have supply chain risk and resiliency maturity from low on the bottom to high on the left. On the x-axis, from 0 on the left to infinity, we call that your competitive advantage. Then, as you can see, we got five stages of the model. Just give you real quick. First and foremost, on the bottom left is foundational. What does that mean? Education and awareness of supply chain risk and resiliency. Visibility, what does that look like? That is essentially advocating visibility in your supply chain up to the suppliers and down to your customers. Third, predictability. Maybe not what you're thinking about. This is digitizing your supply chain. Why? To do what if risk modeling. Fourth, resiliency. This is where we advocate you embed these best practices into your daily supply chain lives. And finally, sustainability on the top right, again, might not be exactly what you're thinking about. It's how do I expand these tools, techniques, and methodologies to essentially go across the enterprise. So those are the five stages. As you can see, I think we normally have a mantra up top where we say identify, assess, mitigate, and manage. And then on the bottom, what we like to do is superimpose a risk heat map of sorts on the model. So you can see if you're at foundational or just at visibility, we would probably say your supply chain is at risk. All right. As you move up the model and maturity, then we say you can essentially mitigate your risk as well. And then we always ask on the right-hand side, which we'll talk about today, where are you today in your supply chain? So that's a quick thumbnail sketch of the model. We're going to go through a couple of slides for you and talk about each one of the elements and some case studies. So I think we can go to the next one. We talked about foundational stage. Give you a thumbnail sketch of, what does that feel like? What is it? It's the start of a journey. All right. So we again advocate that education and awareness is really part of the foundational element. And so you start with formal education, whether it's tools, techniques, methodologies, best practices, classroom, the book, and so forth. Why? On the bottom of this slide, why do we advocate education and essentially the basics? Because you need to develop a universal language, what we call a taxonomy. So that's why foundational stage is very, very important, because education and awareness is the bedrock, as we've seen in 12 years of understanding what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So I think we'll move forward with the next slide. That's Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So once the foundation is set, the focus is on making that timely informed decisions. That's one of the biggest stages to go through. And we need to start that journey with visibility. So creating that awareness of risk across the supply chain, visibility and awareness is very, very important to get us going. And then this also relates to, preferably in real time, the location of materials and assets such as inventory. This transparency across the supply chain, meaning upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers, and the ability to become aware and respond more quickly than your competitors to unexpected risk events and critical factors defining global excellence. So why visibility first? What you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. Greg loves that one. So we often say that. So you got to be visible in order to move forward. So once you are visible, what's next? Well, we want to be able to predict the future of some sort. And so predictability is the third stage of the 5-stage model. As companies progress in their journey, they leverage their visibility capabilities to test their supply chains in terms of what if scenario planning. These exercises utilize network optimization and probabilistic modeling and mapping tools, and provide a view of how supply chains might react to risk events, including the supply, demand, and demand and supply disruptions. Of course, these insights help companies create risk response plans, and for risk exemplars, this leads to development of supply chain risk and virtual war rooms. These rooms, supported by sophisticated tools and techniques, allow a company to be more proactive in identifying risk through alerts, assessing them through digital twins, which is a carbon copy of your data, but from a supply chain perspective. And of course, proactively mitigating these risks through these risk methodologies can turn the risk into an opportunity, which is what we want. We want to be able to get there before our nearest competitor and to serve our customer foremost. And so why predictability? Predictability, exemplar companies want to understand how their supply chains will react to risk stimuli before it occurs. That, Greg?
Yep, you bet. We have 2 other stages we'll go through real quick, then we'll give you kind of an example, some insights. The next is resiliency, and that's the why again. So essentially in this particular stage, we got risk management leaders who embed, we talked about that, they embed the new tools, techniques, and methodologies, even key risk indicators like time to recovery, value at risk, resiliency indexes. They start to embed these into their daily supply chain decision-making. They establish daily supply chain decision-making processes, including risk. They also they're starting to embed deep learning and computer vision with risk alerts, network risk scenario planning. It gets very, very exciting in this stage. They tend to develop potential war rooms to monitor their supply chain and their risks, almost real-time risk action planning, which is very exciting. These are the exemplars. And then essentially at the end of the day, the resiliency is established through frameworks and protocols, metrics, and organizational structure, just like anything else in our supply chain. All right, so that is resiliency. The last element on the model is sustainability. All right, that's the fifth stage. And this is not sustainability for green, folks. This is how do we sustain the tools, techniques, and methods and the journey, and how do we expand it throughout our enterprise? All right, that's what we're talking about. And many of the exemplars use these pure risk protocols: ERM, Enterprise Risk Management; GRC, Governance, Risk, and Compliance; and even ISO risk standards. So we're attempting to expand the sustainability of this journey. So they solidify their risk-adjusted culture that includes risk considerations in all decision making. Again, there's normally not a right or wrong, but if you would start to embed the risk dialogue before you make a decision, we think that's a strategic advantage. In this phase, leaders continually assess their risk profiles, and they regularly evaluate their risk appetite. They calculate it, they put thresholds together, and they understand who they are, and from a culture point of view, from a risk culture, and they leverage databases that they build for risk knowledge. So again, at this stage, leaders recognize that each stage each stage corresponds to several years. This is not a point solution, folks. It's a continuous journey. All right. And so we said we'd provide you some insight. I think the next slide, I'd like to finish with an example of an insight. If you're in visibility, all right, let's say the tool positions you in the visibility stage. All right. What do you believe? Why do we believe you're positioned in this stage? Well, we look at in the characteristics and traits of your organization. We look at governance structure, which are best practices. We ask questions of discovery. We ask questions on process challenges by industry. There are industry challenges and they're different. We ask about what metrics, KPIs and KRIs you use. We ask about technology in support of supply chain risk and resilience. We ask those types of questions, and we ask questions about agility and resiliency in your supply chain, and also provide insights from what we see in terms of what other companies are doing within the industry in terms of supply chain risk and resiliency. So that gives you a sense of some of the insights that we provide after you go through the tool. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And what we're going to cover next is an actual example with one of our clients of who took the survey and the results of that. So we always ask, where are you today and where do you want to be? And you can see this client says they're in middle of visibility and they're looking to reach the sustainability stage. We've done this survey with a number of clients, and interestingly enough, some clients don't want to be in sustainability. They may want to be in predictability or just complete visibility. There's no right or wrong. It's just managing expectations of your team. And so they are, as we can see here, they're pretty well into the stage of visibility, and they're focused on the perspective of bringing together their people, process, data, and technology to move through this stage as that overall goal to establish a sustainable enterprise. The heavy industry client has recognized and agreed with our recommended actions that will be required to transform the company to subsequent stages of predictability and resiliency and to get to that sustainability. And it is a journey. So what we focus on is making sure that we don't look at the shiny objects. We look at what are the different actions that you need to take in order to march up to that, the next stage. What they've done is done that crawl, walk, run approach where they've identified and assessed and mitigated risk manually. And now we're automating those with another group of team to automate those into risk registers. So they're now ready. They'll crawl, walk, run. They have built the risk registers. They know what they want. And so the client has established a corporate risk management organization, which is a very important step in the visibility stage, to get that visibility from management that risks are very, very important. And so now they're gaining access to addressing disruptions in real time. So they have an alert system, and they're bringing those alerts in to try to react to issues quicker than their nearest competitors. So I see Ravi has raised his hand. When we think about supply chain visibility, a lot of businesses want to identify risks within their sub-tier suppliers. How successful have companies been in this area, in your opinion? Why or why not is this the case? I'll let Greg answer it.
It is a good question. It's a burning question. The answer isn't so hot. Only about 10% of polled companies around the world over the last 2 years, only 10% feel very comfortable with visibility into tier 2, tier 3, and tier N. Many of the exemplars And we know of about 350 around the world who do everything you're learning about today and more. They do everything in the book and more. Those folks still wrestle, and they've been doing it for years. They still wrestle, and some executives stay up at night, can't sleep because of tier 3, tier 4 issues, because it gets very complicated, folks, real quick. If we knew of a heavy lifting solution that handles that complexity and cascading effect, we would tell you. There is nothing at the moment, folks. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for the attendee, but yeah, it's a burning question in this space, folks. We're doing everything we can every day to try to enhance that.
That's a great question. Keep them coming. Thank you, Robbie. Just to close it out again, the overview of the 90-day action plan. If you have questions about this, feel free to ping us after the call, and we'll be more than happy to review the program with you in detail. Greg, the give and get. You bet.
Yep, we'll finish up with a give and get, and then maybe answer any of the questions that anyone might want to pose. The actual give or the ask. What do we ask of you when you essentially get engaged with us on this tool? We're looking for 5 to 8 executives from your company to fill out the 90 questions, and it's about 25 minutes per person, really. Could the executives be department heads from each discipline? And I think we pose the disciplines on the bottom. We're trying to also get folks from homogeneous divisions or product lines. Our initial request would be 5 to 8. Could they be department heads that are running the disciplines that you see on the screen? And could they be associated with the same division or the same product line, so that we can get some homogeneous, harmonized kind of answers? So that's pretty much the ask from us. I think the next slide is the get. What do you get for stepping up and working with us? You get a sense, as we said, of where you are. We focused most of our attention on the maturity model, and we can position your division or your product line on the maturity model. What else do you get? You get a sense of who you are in the tool. That's relative to your risk appetite. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just who you are. And we're going to talk about risk appetite, I think, in the next webinar series. You also get a graph of how you operate, or your operational propensity. Again, kind of your operational culture. And we give you all kinds of insights on that. And then after the graphs, you get an aligned 90-day action plan to survive and thrive during COVID and beyond, based on the 3 graphs and the insights that we've come up with. So essentially, you learn as you go through this 90-day plan, you learn how to identify, assess, mitigate, and manage your supply chain risks. We always say resulting in no sooner and act faster than your nearest competitor. You also, we think that if you get engaged with us, going through the 90-day planning tool, assessment tool, you get a strategic advantage to the bottom line. And there's a bonus. We throw in a bonus. For every company that provides 5 or more executives, gets engaged with us with the survey and the tool, the consortium will give your company 1 free pass to our supply chain risk and resilience online course. That's a value of $1,400 US, including a certificate from Lehigh University. So with that, we'll close out our discussion and just try to give you a little more compelling reason to act. Why would anyone want to embed a supply chain risk and resiliency program into their organization? Well, there's a couple compelling reasons from our point of view. exemplar companies that I talked about are achieving these kinds of benefits, leveraging supply chain risk and resilience tools and techniques. Think of it this way. You can get cost reduction. If you develop a robust supply chain risk response program, you can reduce your insurance premiums by over 10%. Insurance companies are getting smarter about supply chain risk, so they're asking questions. Exemplars have reduced their insurance premiums because they have a robust plan. They're also increasing their automated workflow, which again helps them reduce the cost of risk management. There's a cost avoidance factor. All right. The exemplars are essentially being able to detect risks to their supply chain 17% faster than their average competitor. And they're also avoiding cost in terms of 10%, reducing the cost to mitigate risk because they're getting better at it every day. There's more. This improves your working capital. All right. 94% cash flow forecasting. That's pretty good if you're a CFO. And the exemplars are 13 to 15% higher in terms of forecasting cash flow to their stakeholders and so forth because of good risk management. And it frees up cash. The exemplars are freeing up anywhere from 10 to 30% extra cash because of cost reduction and cost avoidance. Then there's something else, cash conversion cycle. If you're not using this method to evaluate your supply chain and your risk, we advocate you do that. All right. Folks who are using the cash conversion cycle with good risk management are seeing a 10 to 20% improvement in their cash conversion. And then the last, Altman Z-score, you may or may not be familiar with this. It's a methodology. It's a predictor for bankruptcy. It's on Wikipedia. You can find it. It's in our book. But essentially, you do this to start looking at your supplier financial health. You can fill it out. It's very easy. Find it on Wikipedia. Why? Because changing a key supplier, folks, for whatever risk reason, relates to about $1 to $3 million of changeover cost. So we think these are pretty compelling reasons to act. And we would say, think big, start small, and act fast. And I'll turn it back to Jim. You're on mute, Jim.
We're closing it out here with a question to provide your challenges that you may consider advancing your supply chain risk management journey. So please enter those in. That might garner some discussion with us. We have a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, to close it out with your questions. I'm looking into the chat room right now to find other questions. Jenny, do you have any questions that you're seeing over there that you want to pipe in?
There's one from, I've lost it now. There's one from Ravi. We didn't read that one out, but I think that's worthy of that's more of a personal, some personal advice. But yeah. Ravi's just asking, would he be considered to be experienced with his degree and his experience? But I think that I'll copy that and then get a personal response from Jim and Greg to send to Ravi.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Sure.
That's a good idea. Any other questions coming up from the
No,
group?
not that I can see.
Okay. All right. So again,
but you haven't scared everyone off yet, so that's a good sign.
Well, we really enjoyed sharing these best practices with the folks attending, and we hope that they find it interesting. And always feel free to reach out to us. We would always want to, support your needs, and we'll be very responsive. Greg's got the very high, fast response rate. two questions from folks. So I think finances and cost expense are key areas where we often encounter things. Greg, some thoughts?
Yeah, there are challenges, folks. This is a journey. You know, you don't just go buy a point solution, put it in, and you're good. This is a journey and a commitment. This is a commitment from your organization to be better prepared and more responsive to risk events than your nearest competitor. All right. And essentially, you're right. There are a host of challenges. This is great. They are, but I guess what we have attempted to help our clients is the cost of doing nothing. All right. There's a trade-off now, folks. Think of it. I'll get on my soapbox for 1 minute for the folks who are still here. Historically, folks, for 35 years in our business, and I've been in the business for 40 years, it's always been what? Efficiency of supply chain. Now the dialogue has changed from being efficient to being effective, which is really code for being resilient. If you can't remain resilient in this VUCA world, there is going to be a tremendous cost to your organization. So that's the thinking going on right now around the globe. Cost efficiency versus being effective. And effective, again, is code word for being resilient and surviving and thriving in a VUCA world, folks. So just wanted to share that insight with you. Appreciate your engagement here with the challenges. There are several. Yes, there are.
Yeah, very good. This is a great way to end it with this everyone participating in the world. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Just a last minute reminder here as we close out the webinar that you know, we have our webinar coming up on January 20th on risk appetite. That webinar is live now. So when you get these slides, you'll click on that link that'll be on this slide and you can sign up right away. So we look forward to seeing you at that next webinar. And many thanks from myself and Greg for joining us. Greg, closing comments?
You bet. Yeah, look forward to seeing you all on the next third webinar, because we're going to do a deep dive on risk appetite. Each webinar is geared towards a deep dive on the elements of the 90-day assessment and action plan tool. So look forward to chatting with you in the future on risk appetite. Thanks a lot for attending.